My name is Grace. I am 38 years old, living in New York, and working as a financial fraud investigator for major corporations. My job is to uncover loopholes, track down the money that vanishes without a trace, and more than anyone else, I understand that the most skilled con artists often hide behind the most familiar faces. That morning, the air was crisp, and my kitchen was filled with the smell of fresh brewed coffee. Michael, my husband, sat at the dining table with his newspaper, wearing the gray sweater I had given him last Christmas. Everything looked calm, just the way a stable family should, until my phone rang. It was my brother Ryan, an international flight attendant. His voice dropped, taut with tension. "Michael is at home with you, right?" I glanced at my husband. "Yes, he's sitting right here." There was a pause, then Ryan whispered in shock, "That's impossible." "Grace, he just boarded a flight to Zurich, business class, with a blonde woman." I could still hear the soft clink of Michael's coffee cup hitting the table. He smiled at me, the same way he had every morning for the past 6 years. But I froze completely. What would you do if your husband sat across from you at the breakfast table, while someone else swore they saw him across the ocean? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you've ever doubted the one you trusted most. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what comes next, because what I discovered after this was far more terrifying than betrayal itself. I set the phone down, my palm cold as if plunged into ice water. Michael sat there sipping his coffee, eyes scanning a finance article in the Wall Street Journal. Everything about him, from the reading glasses perched on his nose to the way he crossed his legs and tapped his knee lightly, was exactly what I had lived beside for nearly a decade. I drew a breath, trying to steady my voice. "Are you planning to go to the office today?" Without lifting his eyes from the paper, he replied casually, "No, I'm working from home. I've got a Zoom meeting with Switzerland at 10 a.m. I forced a small smile and nodded. Inside, everything spun. Switzerland. So he already knew he'd be in Zurich. A new notification flashed on my screen. Ryan had just sent 3 photos. The first image, business class. Morning light, streaming across 2 faces, leaning close in quiet conversation. The man in seat 2 amperes angled his head toward a blonde in a white blazer. His hand rested on the armrest, brushing her arm like it was second nature. The second photo was a side angle clear enough to show the forehead, the bridge of the nose, and the tiny scar on the left cheek. A chill raced down my spine. The third, the man was smiling. Not just any smile. Michael's particular expression when he wanted to charm someone, eyes narrowing, one corner of his mouth lifting, chin tilted toward his target. I rose, grabbed a napkin, and wiped absent-mindedly at the damp glass beside me. Michael looked up. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, just a little tired. I might stay home today." He folded his paper and set it down. "That's good. Let's have lunch together then." I nodded again, skin tight as I tried to maintain normalcy. Michael picked up his phone. "I need to prep some materials in the study. You rest." I watched him walk out of the kitchen. His steps were steady, unhurried, nothing out of place. But that was exactly what unsettled me. I sat down and opened the photos again. Each detail hit like a blow. I investigate financial fraud for a living. I'm trained to spot anomalies buried in flawless numbers. But today, it was my perfect husband, who had become the greatest anomaly of my life. Another short message from Ryan. "The flight took off on time. Be careful." I didn't reply. I couldn't. I went into the bedroom, shut the door, and leaned against the wall. On the bookshelf was our wedding photo, Michael and me under the sun in Central Park, hands intertwined, his gaze fixed on me as if I were the last good thing left in the world. I picked it up, traced his face with my finger, then set it back where the light wouldn't hit it directly anymore. I opened my laptop and logged into our Google Home account linked to the security cameras. If anyone had come or gone, if any stranger had entered the apartment in my absence, I would see it, but everything was unnervingly perfect. No unusual movement, no signs of tampering, nothing at all. I checked the lobby camera. Every evening, Michael appeared on schedule, greeting the guard, swiping his key card, entering as if nothing was wrong. But when I rewound to last night, one detail made me freeze. Michael stood by the elevator, back to the camera, on the phone. Nothing unusual until I noticed his hand. Michael is right-handed, yet in the video he held the phone with his left hand, while his right gestured lightly in that distinctly British manner. A small thing, but Michael never gestured when he spoke on the phone. He was the still, concise type. Then I realized the man in the video walked straight into the apartment without entering the passcode. Why didn't I remember Michael changing the code? I paused the footage, replayed it, stopped at the moment the door opened. The overhead light revealed his face, eerily identical to Michael's. But there was one tiny detail that chilled me to the bone. He wasn't wearing a wedding ring. Michael had never taken his off, not at the gym, not while swimming. I shut the laptop, my heart pounding. The question was no longer, where is he? The question was, who is living in my home? I stepped out of the bedroom. The study light spilled from a door left ajar. Michael was in there. I stood frozen for a few seconds, staring at my trembling hands. Then I pushed the door open, smiling as if nothing had happened. Hey, I'm about to order lunch. Do you want anything? Michael turned, slipping off his glasses, his gaze gentle. Anything's fine, as long as there's salmon like the other day. I nodded, but inside I was already planning. A plan that needed patience, precision, and absolute discretion. Because if there's one lesson I've learned from 20 years investigating the most notorious fraudsters in America, it's that the most dangerous liar isn't the one who deceives convincingly, but the one who lives his lie as if it's the truth. I set lunch on the table with a calm hand. Michael came out of the study right on time, his face carrying the same relaxed glow he always had after a successful meeting. He sat across from me, his chair scraping softly against the wood floor. "This looks great," he said, smiling, eyes flicking toward the colorful dishes. I poured water into glasses, willing my hands not to shake. "I tried a new recipe." He leaned down, scooping up the first bite. Morning light spilled over his face, highlighting the brown eyes that had once been the place I trusted most. He lifted the crab to his mouth, chewed slowly, then nodded. "This is really good. I can taste the butter, garlic, and dill?" I nodded. "Yes, with a touch of chili. I like it. Different, but good." I pressed my lips together, staring at the bread I hadn't touched. Michael ate half the plate without a reaction. No redness, no shortness of breath. No reaching for the EpiPen we always kept in the drawer. 7 years together, I had watched him rushed to the ER 3 separate times for severe shellfish allergies, specifically crab. Once, anaphylaxis had landed him in the ICU for 2 days. I still remembered the terror in his eyes then, the doctor's stern warning to avoid shellfish entirely. We threw out every trace of it. He even wore a medical alert bracelet. And now, here he was, eating crab like it was his favorite dish. I forced a smile. "If you like it, I'll make it again this weekend. I'll look forward to it." I propped my chin on my hand, watching his expression. No unease, no hesitation. Every movement seamless, natural, as if allergies had never existed. Memories flooded back. 3 months ago, Michael claimed he had to be in Chicago for 3 days for a hedge fund conference. I'd wanted to join, my schedule was clear, but he brushed it off, saying it was closed door, not for outsiders. When he returned, he gave me an expensive silk scarf, saying he bought it at the airport because it matched my eyes. I'd been touched, but what I remembered most now was the unfamiliar perfume lingering on his shirt collar that evening. Sweet, sharp, definitely not mine. I had also once found a Hilton Garden Inn key card in his jacket pocket, though he'd told me he was staying at the Marriott. When I asked, he'd laughed it off, claiming he'd just picked up a brochure. I hadn't thought much of it because I trusted him, because when you want to believe, evidence bends to fit the belief. But now, each small detail struck like a drumbeat in my chest. After lunch, Michael retreated to the study, saying he had reports to edit. I cleared the table, rinsed dishes under the noon light streaming through the kitchen windows, strips of brightness slanting across the marble counter. My hands looked steady, though my insides churned. I walked to the bedroom, opened his nightstand drawer. The medical alert bracelet was still there. I lifted it, turning it in my hand. The engraving remained. Severe shellfish allergy. Immediate EpiPen use required. He had never taken it off, but today he wasn't wearing it. I set it back carefully, closed the drawer, then opened my phone. I replayed the lobby footage from the night before, slowed the moment the man entered. Studied his face, his gait. No obvious flaw. But no bracelet either. I couldn't draw a final conclusion yet, but I could no longer ignore the blind spots. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. Most expenses were ordinary utilities, groceries, stable investments. But something stood out. For the past month, every few days, there had been charges at Cartier Jewelry, a Soho cosmetics store, a Brooklyn fashion boutique. Michael had never cared about women's fashion. He never bought surprise gifts, always saying, "You'd pick better yourself." So who were those purchases for? I looked at my wrist, no new bracelets. My vanity, no new cosmetics. He hadn't given me anything in 2 months. I documented each transaction. Store names, addresses, amounts, dates. Built a detailed spreadsheet the way I always did when investigating discrepancies. I needed evidence. I needed logic. And most of all, I needed the truth. Not because I wanted to break up my family, but because I needed to know who I was actually living with. And if that person wasn't Michael, then I had to find out where the real Michael was. I brewed a cup of black tea, carried it into my private office, and locked the door. The small room at the end of the hallway was where I usually spent hours analyzing suspicious money transfers for major clients. Today, the subject under investigation was the man I had once shared everything with, my life, and even my bank accounts. I opened my laptop and logged into the monitoring system I had built for my own protection. Not because I had ever suspected my husband, but because defense had long been second nature to me. I started with the joint account. For the first few months of the year, every expense looked reasonable. Utility bills, apartment maintenance fees, groceries, dining, plane tickets under my name. But by mid-April, a series of withdrawals began appearing, each just under $10,000, wired to a private bank in Delaware. The memo line read, "Temporary investment." I pulled the transaction history and checked the user credentials. Each transfer was authorized under Michael's account. On the surface, nothing looked amiss: valid OTP codes, logins from US-based IP addresses. But when I ran device analysis, something strange popped up. On May 14th, at 9:47 p.m. New York time, there had been a login from an IP address located in Geneva, Switzerland. What stopped me cold was that, at that exact moment, Michael had been sitting beside me in the living room watching a documentary. I remembered because we'd had a mild argument over his film choice. I opened the login log. IP address 185.98.2 to 10.45. Device MacBook Air. Same operating system as Michael's laptop, but not the same serial number. I moved on to the investment accounts we co-owned. In June, part of the portfolio had been liquidated, but I never received any transaction alerts at my email, which was set up for notifications. A deeper check revealed the contact email had been quietly changed back in March. Instead of my old address, the system now listed m.bradley.consult@securemail.pro. I had never seen Michael use that address, and Bradley was not his name. I printed the entire log, every update, every IP record. The black and white lines were clinical, but each number weighed on me like a stone pressing into my chest. Then I checked the credit card statements. Alongside fashion and cosmetics charges, two new transactions stood out. One payment to Celestial Voyages, a luxury cruise company, and a deposit on a lakeside apartment in Como, Italy. The reservation was under the name Madeline R. Vale. That name meant nothing to me. I froze. Michael had never mentioned anyone named Madeline, and clearly this wasn't business-related. No one in finance puts down a deposit on an Italian vacation home during peak season unless they plan to stay. I traced the confirmation email linked to the booking. It led me to a personal Instagram account @Mattervale. Most photos were locked, but the profile picture was clear. Blonde, the same woman from the photos Ryan had sent me. I stepped away from the computer, drew the curtain open. Outside, the light had shifted into the pale gold of late afternoon. Michael was living two lives, and he had prepared carefully. I went back to the desk and launched one of my investigative tools software that mapped money flows across borders and cross-checked them with offshore banks, especially in the Cayman Islands and Malta. Within 10 minutes, the system flagged 4 transactions from Michael's account each, just under $9,999 wired to a shell company called Dover Eclipse LLC, registered in Delaware but with a receiving branch in Georgetown, Cayman Islands. I pulled the file. Dover Eclipse LLC had no physical office, no listed employees, and was managed by a trustee service named Merrick Advisors. I remembered that name from a large-scale laundering case 3 years ago. Our money was being siphoned away under the guise of investments. If I hadn't looked this deep, no one would notice. No alarms from the banks, no questions asked. A chill spread down my back. Every move Michael had made was meticulous, from structuring transfers to spoofing IP addresses to altering financial records. He wasn't just betraying me. He was paving his exit, draining our assets, leaving me with the wreckage. I opened my notes app and began typing. The list grew. IP addresses, company names, the woman's name, timestamps, cruise booking, LLC records. I built a temporary financial map, encrypted it, and saved it. I needed a second opinion from someone who had seen worse. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Linda Parker. She'd been with the FBI, now running her own security consultancy, specializing in financial fraud and corporate espionage. We had worked together 2 years ago on a covert capital flight case in Miami. I called. After 3 rings, she picked up. Grace? Her voice was as sharp and clipped as ever. Do you have time? I need to meet right away. Something's wrong. How bad? I hesitated. I'm not sure the man living with me is Michael. A short silence. Then Linda said, "Meet me at my office." 30 minutes. I arrived at her Flatiron office at exactly 4:17 p.m. The building was a sleek glass facade, quiet amid the rush and horns of Manhattan. I stepped into the elevator, clutching the folder I had printed at home. Screenshots, IP logs, access codes, every piece of data I had spent sleepless nights compiling. 11th floor. The door opened. No logo, no sign, just a plain black wooden door with a small etched plate. Parker Security Solutions. I knocked twice. The door swung open immediately. Linda stood there in her usual black shirt and dark jeans, hair tied back, eyes sharp as scalpels. She tilted her head, motioning me inside. Sit, she said, pointing to the leather chair across her desk. Without pleasantries, I laid the file down. I've been tracking this for 3 weeks, and I'm certain the man in my home is not Michael. Linda didn't flinch. She pulled the folder toward her. Start from the beginning. Bank accounts. Hidden transfers. Delaware Shell Company. Wires to Cayman. European IP logins, while Michael was supposedly home. None of this adds up. She skimmed the pages quickly. Dover, Eclipse LLC, Merrick Advisors. Have you heard the Palm Beach laundering case last year? I nodded. You think it's connected? Not think. Merrick only handles very big clients, usually shielding assets for elites or executives under investigation. No one uses Merrick to cover an affair. She paused, opened her laptop, and typed code into a console. What else? I slid her my phone with Madeline's photo. This woman, Madeline Arvale, she's listed on the Como property. Instagram's locked, but the face matches the blonde. From Zurich. Linda zoomed in, squinting. Her field? Officially, pharma business consultant. But her flight history lines up with recent biotech stock swings. She's tied to at least 3 hedge fund managers. A financial investigator like you being targeted, plus a mistress acting as an insider pipeline. Grace, this isn't a love triangle. It's financial espionage. She rose, fetched a thin file from the shelves, and dropped it on the desk. The cover read, Case Hazen 847, Hamilton Fraud Ring, 2018. You remember this one? The Hamilton Corporation's CEO was impersonated. They used deepfake reports to falsify earnings. Linda nodded. Their systems were breached from European IPs, just like yours. When exposed, the imposter's real identity didn't exist in any database. It was all crafted by a group we call the Mirrors. They specialize in building live duplicates of key people to steal not only their identity but their access. I sat in silence. Until now, I had framed this as personal betrayal. But if Linda was right, and I had no reason to doubt her, then Michael hadn't just abandoned me. He had sold my name, my work, maybe even my future, to an organization hiding in the dark. Where do they find stand-ins? She opened another folder. Mostly private casting networks. There's even a darknet site listing roles like middle-aged executive, British accent, reserved manner, angular face, an exact match for Michael. You think someone has been living in my home, playing Michael for 3 months? Grace, if you'd asked me 3 years ago, I'd have said no. But now, you'd better prepare yourself. I looked at Madeline's picture. If I gather more data, can you confirm the depth of infiltration? Linda nodded. Send me everything: cameras, emails, investment accounts, company reports, device logs. I'll analyze for synthetic trails. If it's a stand-in, I'll find it. I gripped the table edge. If Michael is somewhere else, then this isn't infidelity, it's a federal crime, likely tied to laundering, tax evasion, even moving assets illegally out of U.S. jurisdiction. I exhaled slowly. So, next step? Linda locked eyes with me. First, do not confront the man at home. Keep observing, document everything, and don't let him suspect. Can you monitor remotely? Yes. I'll send you a stealth tracker for his laptop. If he's a stand-in, he'll have a script, and I want to see how he studies his lines. I stood, gathering the file. Thank you. She touched my shoulder as I turned to leave. You're sharp, Grace. But remember, impersonators are programmed to be cold. Their only weakness is emotion. They can't fake that forever. I gave a faint nod, no words. And as the elevator doors closed, it struck me. For 3 months, that man had never once lingered on me after dinner. The real Michael always brushed my hair back absent-mindedly when I wasn't looking. But this version only smiled at the right moments, said the right words, held the right gaze, never a hair out of place. And that was the biggest flaw of all. The sky had already darkened when I returned to the apartment. The city had put on its shimmering yet distant lights. My place on the 22nd floor was as quiet as always, everything in its meticulous order so deliberate it felt almost artificial. I unlocked the door, brushed my foot across the rug, and turned on the kitchen light. Beyond the glass windows stretched the patchwork glow of Lexington Avenue. Michael wasn't home. Or rather, the man wearing Michael's face wasn't there. I set my bag on the table and walked straight to the tiny camera Linda had given me. No bigger than a USB stick, it could slip into the slot behind his computer without drawing suspicion. I had planned to place it later that evening, while he showered or exercised, just like he usually did. But before I could go further, a strange sound came from the back door. I froze. The faint click of a lock, not hurried, not forced. As if whoever opened it had a key but still wanted to stay unnoticed. Holding my breath, I pulled a small kitchen knife from the drawer and moved slowly toward the side hallway. The hinges squeaked. A figure slipped through the gap, shorter than Michael, wearing a hooded jacket. He closed the door quickly behind him. I flicked on the light, knife raised. He startled, stepping back, hands lifted by reflex. "Don't scream. I don't have a weapon." My grip tightened. "Who are you?" "Ethan," he said, pushing the hood back. His face appeared under the harsh white ceiling light. Not a stranger, yet not familiar either. "I'm not here to hurt you. I need to talk. Urgently." I didn't lower the knife, but I shifted half a step back, enough for him to stand in the light. His face was gaunt, sharp-edged, the kind more used to stage lights than dark hallways. There was a faint resemblance to Michael, but something missing. The presence. "You know who I am?" I asked. "Grace Hamilton, wife of Michael Hamilton." My lips curled faintly. "Then what are you? A messenger? Or the stand-in?" He inhaled deeply. "I'm an actor. Ethan Cole. I was hired through a private casting channel. The brief was, play a finance executive, slight British accent, living in New York, married. Duration, 3 months. No media exposure, no questions allowed. Compensation, $25,000. I lowered the knife, laying it flat on the stone counter. The suspicion that had haunted me was finally spoken aloud. "You lived in my home, with me, for 3 months. Ethan nodded carefully, as if afraid I might strike at any second. "I was trained with a script nearly 100 pages long, from the way you drink coffee to the scar on your left wrist, even how you tilt your head when you laugh. The phrases you use when you're tired. I had to memorize everything. And you never wondered why you were pretending to be another woman's husband?" He held my gaze. "I used to wait tables, played corpses in TV shows, lost roles to men 10 years younger because I wasn't camera-friendly enough. When they told me to just act like a married man in a luxury Manhattan apartment, I thought it was some reality concept or strange art project." I crossed my arms, scrutinizing him. "And you didn't notice anything wrong?" "Yes," he admitted quietly. But too late. He pulled a folder wrapped in plastic from his jacket. I kept everything they gave me. Scripts, notes, floor maps, even the vocal drills. I opened it, each page neatly typed, some with red, handwritten notes. "Grace gets suspicious after 10 p.m. Avoid arguments. Watch left ring finger, she always checks the band. Habit of twisting ring when stressed, don't slip up, unlike the real Michael. Air caught in my throat." Everything was prepared so well I had no reason to doubt, Ethan said hoarsely. Until I found withdrawal slips from offshore accounts on his computer. And the security cameras were removed days before I moved in. "So, where's the real Michael?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know. I only met him twice, once for appearance and voice check, once for a handshake contract. No recordings, no papers. After that, his assistant handled it. What name? Jackson. Or at least that's what he called himself. Always sunglasses, burner phones. I clenched the edge of the counter to stay calm. For the first time, Ethan's eyes flickered. You're not the only one being used, Grace. So am I. If you hand me over to the FBI, I'll accept it. But before that, please look at what I've brought. I secretly recorded a few conversations. And one video, Michael himself teaching me how to smile at the right angle, as if I were his living duplicate. I studied him. Worn, gaunt, terrified, but not lying. I nodded slowly. I won't hand you over, not yet. But from this moment, you do exactly as I say. His answer came without hesitation. Yes. I turned away, still trembling. The man I had lived beside for months wasn't my husband. The one standing here was an actor bought and directed. And the man I once called my husband was somewhere out there, running a perfect performance I had only just stumbled into halfway. Hours later, I sat across from Linda in a soundproof back room at her office, the lights dimmed to focus on the documents spread between us. Ethan had left an hour earlier after we extracted his hard drive and recordings. He had sat in silence most of the time, guilt etched deeper than exhaustion. Linda leaned toward the glowing screen, where a network chart slowly lit up with nodes, company names, transactions, IP addresses, identities hidden under layers of aliases. Grace, it's starting to take shape, she said. Michael isn't working alone, and he's not just a con artist. My eyes fixed on the name she'd marked in red, Castor Group Holdings. Castor looks like a venture capital firm, Linda explained, voice low. But underneath, they run a global network of insider trading and money laundering. They use false identities, shell corporations, accounts in lenient jurisdictions. And the most dangerous thing, they have a professional double system. Trained actors, impersonators, planted to replace key people whenever needed. I whispered, like Ethan. Exactly. And like Michael, who once used them to cover his own disappearance. It's all designed to siphon data from the inside, manipulate the markets. She slid a file across. On the cover was a photo of a woman, blonde curls, sharp chin, icy blue eyes. Sophia Hale, 27, former pharma sales rep. For the past 2 years, she's been appearing at hedge fund summits in Switzerland, Luxembourg, Singapore. Every time she shows up, stock movements precede FDA announcements. I stared at the face. I had seen her before the woman Ryan photographed on the Zurich flight, hand resting casually on Michael's arm. Grace, Linda continued, nearly every data leak lines up with your schedule, files you handled. And they were accessed through your personal account, your computer, your Wi-Fi at home. I went still. So, Michael or his stand-in was inside with you, tapping into everything. They weren't just stealing money. They were using you as a gateway. Anger rose hot in my chest. I, who had exposed the most intricate frauds, had been reduced to an unwitting pawn. Linda stood, pulling a thick envelope from the cabinet. This is the surveillance file on Sophia. If you want to understand, start here. Inside were dozens of pages, hotels, restaurants, conferences, resorts, each matched with stock surges. Sophia appeared like a shadow, always near the powerful, always gone before the crash. One photo stopped me cold. It showed a lobby in Midtown, the same conference I missed back in March. Michael had said he'd attend for me to take notes. There he was, unmistakably him, the real Michael, standing beside Sophia. I recognized the scar under his chin, the slightly uneven shoulders, the way he tilted his head when listening. He hadn't been covering for me. He had been using my credentials to infiltrate. My hands clenched the table. They played me like a pawn. Linda's eyes sharpened. Then it's time you became the one moving the pieces. Her words sank deep. The grief shifted into something else, cold, focused resolve. They're preparing to disappear, Linda said. We have intel Sophia will be in Switzerland again next week. Could be the final transfer. I thought of everything I'd lost: the trust, the ordinary evenings in the kitchen, the illusion of partnership. Grace, you can help us turn this around. But you'll have to face Michael not as his wife. I lifted my chin. Not a wife. A seeker of truth. Linda gave a short nod, then handed me a silver gray card the size of a credit card. This device records everything: audio, location, real-time feed. Slip it into something he carries. We'll know where he goes, who he meets. The metal was cold against my palm. Michael had once been my refuge from the chaos of the world. Now he was the architect of that chaos. But I would not lose myself in it. Not this time. I left Linda's office close to 8 p.m. The city lights glared across the skyline. Inside the apartment, Ethan stood at the stove, pretending calm. He turned as I entered. I'm making beef bourguignon, he said lightly. He told me it was your favorite. I didn't answer. I went straight to my desk, powered up the computer, and plugged in the drive containing Linda's code. That file wasn't ordinary. It was a fabricated financial structure designed to look like a fourth quarter asset report, portfolio valuation, restructuring proposals, cash flows into emerging market funds. The interface was flawless down to the smallest detail: company names, tax IDs, performance charts. But inside it carried a hidden chain of commands. The moment this file was opened from any foreign IP address or a device not registered in my system, it would instantly freeze all financial accounts linked to Michael and Sophia, send a complete copy of the data and access logs to the SEC and the FBI, trigger a direct alert signal to Linda's system. I named the file Q4, Portfolio Aggregate, Final, DocX, and placed it in the shared cloud folder. Michael and I both used the one he still logged into every Monday morning to review the portfolio. Once that was done, I moved to the next part of the plan. I sat down and drafted an email with the subject: 8-year anniversary private gathering at home, RSVP required. The content was simple, polite, and perfectly in Michael's tone. We'd like to host a private gathering at the apartment next Monday morning to thank our partners for their years of support. This isn't a large party, just champagne, croissants, and a sincere word of appreciation. But we truly hope you can come, as it would mean a great deal to us. The guest list was chosen carefully. Michael's 3 biggest clients: a strategic partner from Antheon Fund, 2 London hedge fund directors he'd had shady dealings with, and 1 financial journalist from Wall Street Insight I'd known since the Luxterra Bank data leak case. Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter, watching me. Are you sure about this? I didn't turn. All you need to do is play your part until the morning is over, exactly as you were trained. And after that, you walk away from all of it. I caught his small nod from the corner of my eye. I didn't fully trust Ethan, but I knew he'd been deceived too, and now he was the only living witness to confirm what no security camera ever could. Monday morning arrived quickly. I woke early, putting on the simple cream dress Michael had once chosen for a Chicago reception. I left my hair loose over my shoulders, the way I usually did for formal occasions. Ethan wore a dark gray suit with a moss green tie, the exact ensemble Michael favored when greeting clients. On the bar counter, I placed a small wooden sign: 8 years together, thank you for being part of the journey. The wine rack was set with Loire champagne, crystal glasses polished to brilliance, candles spreading a faint citrus scent from an oil diffuser. Everything looked familiar, perfectly Michael, evoking the illusion of a stable life. At 8:02 a.m., the doorbell rang. The first guest was Robert Stanton, head of Stanton Partners. Next came Claire Murphy of Phoenix Capital. Then the two London visitors, Sebastian McClure and Evan Wright. They entered with practiced courtesy, unaware they were stepping into a crime scene disguised with champagne and buttery pastries. I guided the conversation, gently breaking the guests into smaller groups so Ethan could drop by and greet each one like a polished host. He did well. Every glance, nod, handshake was executed with precision. But I knew a single slip would bring the whole thing crashing down. At 9:17 a.m., Ethan was speaking with Sebastian when a message from Linda appeared on my phone. File opened. IP, Zurich, Switzerland. Transaction blocked. FBI has full data. I kept my face calm, pouring more champagne, though my heart beat deep and steady. As I passed Ethan, I whispered, "You can exit. It's done." He gave a slight nod, excusing himself toward the office as if to take an urgent call. I let him go. At 9:29 a.m., my phone rang. Not Linda, Michael. His video call filled the screen, showing him in a hotel suite. A wide window behind revealed a lake view. His eyes were cold, his face unreadable. "What are you doing, Grace?" I held his gaze, smiled faintly, set my glass down, and stood tall before the crowded room. "You'll know soon enough, Michael. Because I'm not the wife I used to be." The call still open on speaker. I turned the camera toward the living room, more than a dozen guests, glasses in hand, staring with unsettled curiosity. They didn't understand yet, but they would. I placed the phone on the table, switched on speaker mode, and drew a USB stick from a thin envelope. "Thank you all for being here this morning," I began, voice steady, like opening a financial risk briefing. "What you're about to hear will explain a great deal." The room hushed. I plugged in the USB, selecting a recording I had kept from that fateful morning. Ryan's voice played, shaky but clear. "Sis, Michael's home, right?" "Yes, he's in the kitchen having coffee. Why?" "Don't panic. I'm serving on a flight to Zurich, and I see him, sitting in business class, next to a blonde. I swear I'm not mistaken." The silence afterward was absolute. I glanced around. Faces that once trusted Michael, who had entrusted him with tens of millions, were turning pale. I pulled out the thick script Ethan had handed me the night before, detailing my every move, down to how I twisted my ring when tense. I raised a single page: Grace's morning routine, simulation, black coffee, 1 teaspoon brown sugar, no cream. "This," I said, "is what the man you knew as Michael used to live in my home for 3 months, while the real one was orchestrating illegal trades across the ocean." Robert Stanton stepped forward, flipping through pages rapidly, eyes scanning in disbelief. "You're saying I cut him off? The man drinking with you at signings, taking your reports, discussing portfolios wasn't Michael Hamilton. It was Ethan Cole, an actor hired to impersonate him. The real Michael was in Zurich, or on his way there." Right then, my phone buzzed hard. A message from Linda. "Arrest made. Gate C-23 Newark Airport. Michael Hamilton cuffed at passport control. FBI confirmed ID by biometrics. In custody." I didn't hide my smile. I lifted the phone where Michael's frozen face still glared. His calm was cracking. "You can hang up now," I said evenly. "Someone else will be waiting at the gate for you." There was a long silence. Then he disconnected. The screen went black. The room stayed silent until the doorbell rang. I opened it to find 2 FBI agents in plain clothes. A tall woman with salt and pepper hair held out her badge. "Special Agent Sarah Lorne, Federal Financial Crimes Unit. We have a warrant to collect evidence at this location." I nodded. "The apartment and everything in it, hard drives, records, computers are ready." The male agent scanned the room. We'll also need witnesses. Ethan stepped forward from the corner, glass trembling in his hand. He pulled out a hard drive and a stack of handwritten notes. I was hired to play Michael Hamilton. These are all the materials given to me. And recordings, voice directives from him personally. Sarah accepted them, nodding. Thank you for cooperating. We'll ensure you have protection through the proceedings. Claire Murphy's lips pressed thin. Grace, when did you start this? I met her eyes. The moment my husband ate crab without an EpiPen. Robert Stanton let out a short laugh, stunned but begrudgingly impressed. You opened our eyes. And maybe saved hundreds of millions from a traitor. I said nothing. I looked around the apartment, once a home, now a crime scene. Every fake gesture, every staged smile had led to this moment. And I, once taught to be soft, patient, to put family above career, had broken every rule, stood with evidence, and turned my own heartbreak into testimony. Then my phone buzzed again. A message from Linda. He's talking. Confirm Sophia as the main link. Data sent to SEC. Next step, hearings. My hand tightened. I was ready. No longer Grace Hamilton, the wife, but Grace, the witness, the exposer, the one forcing the system to see itself. On a brisk April morning in New York, I walked into federal court. The wind whipped down the streets as if eager to sweep away the last dust of the past still clinging to me. The Southern District courtroom was full not with gawkers, but with people who knew this trial would set precedent. An organized transnational fraud case involving false identities, AI manipulation, offshore webs, and shell companies run by faces no one suspected. Michael Hamilton was brought into the courtroom, wearing a gray-blue prison uniform. He looked thinner than before, streaks of gray at his temples, yet his face carried the same blank expression I had seen every morning for 7 years of marriage. The woman seated beside him, Sophia Hale, wore a slate gray suit, her head bowed, her eyes never once daring to rise as I entered. I sat in the front row on the left, beside the FBI's attorney and 2 prosecutors from the Department of Justice. Ethan was there too, a row behind me, wearing dark glasses and a baseball cap, watched closely by 2 agents under the Witness Protection Program. When our eyes met, he gave me a small nod, a silent agreement that, though we began on opposite sides, we had ended this game together. The trial opened with the indictment read, each charge clear and deliberate. Michael Hamilton and Sophia Hale were charged with organized financial fraud, theft of insider information from investment firms and healthcare corporations, exploiting a legal wife's identity to access classified data, laundering money through 7 shell companies in Delaware, Panama, the Cayman Islands, and Luxembourg, concealing crimes through deepfake technology, false identities, and hired stand-ins. I listened to each count as if it were a ledger of everything I had ever felt. Every strange scent on his shirts, every touch that had lost its warmth, every silent evening I had tried to fill with unanswered questions. Michael stayed silent through the opening. Sophia broke down in tears when prosecutors showed evidence that she had used my internal email to conduct illegal trades, including a series of messages signed Grace Hamilton to a London hedge fund director. I studied the forged signature. The loop in the G was off, the I in my last name, missing its dot. A small detail, but proof she had never been me and could never be me. The most damning evidence came from an audio file on Ethan's hard drive. Michael, she never suspects, still thinks I'm careless, the guy who forgets anniversaries. She has no idea I rebuilt a better version of myself. Sophia, what about the Zurich account? Michael, we'll move it before Friday. Grace won't have time to react. She trusts me blindly. I watched him in that moment. What chilled me wasn't the coldness in his voice, but the faith he placed in my blindness. He never knew my trust was not infinite. In the civil proceedings, I was represented by a lawyer seasoned in divorce and inheritance disputes. He laid it out clearly: all marital assets, including the Manhattan apartment, 2 real estate investments in Florida and New Jersey, and stock portfolios in 3 hedge funds were joint funds, of which 62% were my contributions. More importantly, I proved Michael had used my name to manipulate accounts, violating multiple financial and legal statutes. The court ruled I retained full ownership of existing assets, including returns from joint investments. More importantly, the entire $52 million in frozen overseas accounts, money, the FBI confirmed came from illicit activity, could not be touched by Michael or Sophia. Those funds would be redirected for investigation and restitution to affected firms. Ethan was spared criminal charges for full cooperation but required to remain in witness protection for at least 18 months. He could not leave his registered location and had to report regularly to the FBI. Yet Ethan didn't complain. Before leaving the courtroom, he stepped close and whispered, "Grace, thank you for not treating me like an enemy. I've never played a role harder than being your husband." I smiled faintly. "Because that role was never yours, and you never abused it." He nodded, then walked away with the 2 agents. I watched him disappear down the hallway, thinking about the substitutions life forces upon us and how sometimes, even in roles we never wanted, we can still choose the right side. A month later, I received formal notice. The investigation phase was closed, charges were official, and Sophia's extradition from Switzerland would occur within 6 weeks. My apartment was no longer a crime scene. I hired a design team to redo everything. New curtains, new furnishings, every trace Michael had touched removed. I kept only one thing: the oak mantel clock my father gave me on my wedding day. It stood as proof of the one thing unchanged through the chaos: I was still myself. And I had risen not with tears, but with truth, with law, with evidence gathered through sleepless nights. When the final verdict came down, I didn't feel triumph. Only peace, a simplicity no amount of money, power, or false promises could ever buy. I left that apartment on a clear summer morning, sunlight spilling across Manhattan's glass towers as if to wipe clean every trace left in that 22nd floor home. The real estate agent handed the keys to the new owners, a young couple from Chicago, eyes bright with hope. I said nothing beyond, "May you create wonderful memories here." They didn't need to know the kitchen once brewed coffee by an imposter or the bedroom once staged a 3-month play. The cracks were plastered over, so was I. With part of my recovered assets, I leased a small office in the Flatiron District, the same place Linda and I had spent long nights piecing evidence together. Just enough space, 2 desks, a modest lounge with gray fabric chairs, a bookshelf, and a glass wall facing Fifth Avenue. I registered the company as Helia Consulting. No need to put my name on the sign. I no longer needed recognition to validate me. What mattered was the mission: protecting women from financial wounds invisible to the law. Financial identity protection, that's what I called it. Not just audits, not simple financial advising, but identifying risks, exposing manipulation, defending autonomy from bank accounts to investments to suspicious emails once overlooked. My first client was a 48-year-old anesthesiologist from the Upper West Side, who had just discovered her husband siphoning $4,999 every week into a private account for 2 years. The second was a single mother who had handed full control of her assets to a brilliant investor boyfriend. After them came many others, smart, strong, rational women who had simply trusted the wrong person, as I once had. At each meeting, I came prepared. Not only with spreadsheets, but with patience to listen. Their stories carried not only numbers, but tears, losses, and hidden pieces of themselves. I couldn't rebuild their trust for them, but I laid the first brick of a new foundation: transparency. One late afternoon, as I reviewed a new client's file, my assistant brought in an envelope, no stamp, just my name written on the front. I opened it. The handwriting was familiar, steady, precise, the same practice style once used to forge Michael's signature. But this time, it was real. Grace, I know I have no right to ask forgiveness. I don't excuse what I did. I just want to thank you. Because you didn't push me off the edge completely. Thanks to you, I didn't lose what little humanity I had left. I'm teaching acting now at a community class in Brooklyn. My students are women after divorce, teenagers who dropped out, and people like me who once lived by roles, now learning to live honestly. If you ever need a witness, or just an actor ready not to act anymore, I'll be here, Ethan. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not to keep, but to remember. Even those who stray can turn back if they choose. 2 weeks later, Ryan and I hosted a small gathering at his new apartment in Brooklyn. The balcony overlooked the Manhattan Bridge, string lights glowing warm. Ryan grilled barbecue. I brought roasted eggplant salad, a recipe our mother used to make every Thanksgiving. Close friends came: Ryan's airline colleagues, my old college friends. The music was soft, the clinking glasses gentle, and for once, conversations didn't orbit around law, trials, or money. As dusk settled, Ryan handed me a glass of red wine out on the balcony. I still remember that morning, he said, voice low. If I hadn't called, then you might have always been the brother of a woman betrayed without ever knowing. I smiled, clinking glasses. But you saved me, not just from Michael, from the danger of my own silence. We stood quietly as the breeze carried the damp, familiar scent of the city. That night, back at the office to grab a forgotten file, I stood before the wide glass window overlooking Manhattan's skyline. The city glowed, each tower a marker in the path I had walked. I once thought betrayal would drag me into a pit, make me lose direction, keep me from standing again. But now I knew. Betrayal taught me to separate real from false, to master pain, to turn it into strength. I stood there, my reflection on the glass, no longer pitied, no longer controlled by soft words laced with calculation. I was no longer the wife in someone else's play. I was the writer of my own script. And this time, I didn't need anyone to read my lines. And that is my story. A journey not only to reclaim justice, but to reclaim the respect I should have had from the beginning. Looking back, I still don't understand how those bound by blood could scheme and trample me so easily. But I know this: I am not alone. And what about you? If you were me, would you forgive? Or would you fight, as I did? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to hear your perspective. And if you've ever faced betrayal, belittlement, or injustice within your own family, you are not alone. The stories ahead on this channel will continue exploring those hidden corners of family ties where trust is tested and where strength means standing up for yourself. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss these raw stories of life and the lessons that maybe are exactly what you need to hear right now. Thank you for staying with me until the very end.